Sara, and I teach all types of sewing all around the country. And one of the biggest questions that I get from my students in my classes is, why are we encouraged by our teachers and our sewing machine manufacturers to change our needles so frequently? We didn't have to do that in the past. Well, the real answer here is that the entire sewing industry has changed. We have so many different types of sewing machines, embroidery machines, quilting machines, sergers. There are so many different types of machines, and also just as many different types of fabrics and fibers and materials to work with. And when you start playing with those combinations of different techniques and materials and machines, you do need to experiment with some different types of needles. So Klasse has come out with an entire assortment of needles designed to work with those different types of sewing techniques. Now, they understand that it can be a little bit confusing, so if you were to visit your local sewing retailer, you would find the Klasse display is loaded with good information. You'll see the needles hanging on the display with great descriptions as to when and why you would use those needles and what the differences are between them. And along with the display, you may even find one of these little cards from Klasse that you can take home. If you see one of these, grab one to take home with you because it's a really great resource. If I open it up, you'll see inside that they give a picture and a description of every type of needle that they offer, so you can see what the differences are. It's the point of the needle and the eye of the needle and the shaft. They're all just a little bit different, and then it tells you why. So I'd like to start by talking about Sharps needles and Jeans needles. They're a little bit similar in that they both have a very sharp point. And you can see right on the picture, the Jeans needle has a really sharp tip. But then when you look at the Sharp or microfiber needle, it's even pointier, sharper. And these are great for working not just with jeans, but any sort of fibers that are really tightly woven. I know a lot of quilters like to work with batiks, and batiks tend to be very tightly woven. They make a little bit more of a sound when you're stitching through them, and it's nice to have a very sharp needle to pierce those fibers with every stitch and make sure you get a beautiful, straight, perfect looking stitch. So Sharps and Jeans needles are two of the types of needles that I tend to keep on hand. They do come in several different sizes, and in each of these packages you get an assortment of different sizes too, which is also really nice depending on the type of thread that you're working with. Now, another couple of common needles that are a little bit similar that I like to keep on hand are universal and ballpoint needles. A universal needle has a semi-ballpoint tip, and what's beautiful about that is that as you're stitching, it doesn't pierce a hole in the fabrics. Now, a ballpoint needle is completely rounded and ballpoint at the end, and that way when you're working with a ballpoint needle, rather than piercing fabrics, it literally falls between the fibers of the fabrics and creates a stitch. So your universal is a semi-ballpoint, which is great for a lot of different types of fabrics, and your ballpoint is perfect for knits, because if you're working with knit type fabrics and you pierce a hole in the fibers with every single stitch, those holes can tend to ravel or grow with time. So to make sure that you get the most longevity and durability out of your knit projects, it's important to use that ballpoint needle. Now, if you're a quilter and you're working with a universal needle, you may find that your stitches aren't perfectly straight. I know sometimes in my quilt shop, I'll have people bring in a sample of fabric with their stitching on it, and their stitches just look a little bit wonky, and they think maybe it's the machine or the fiber that they're working with, when really it's actually the needle. If you're using a universal needle with quilting fabrics, rather than piercing a hole directly into your quilting fabric with every single stitch, your needle is going to search for a place between the fibers to fall through. And that is going to give you the look of a little bit wonky stitch. It won't be a perfectly straight row of stitching. So if you find that you have that problem, go back to your Jeans or your Sharps needle to get a better result. Now, if you're working with a fabric with two-way stretch, such as Lycra, it's really important to make sure that you use an actual stretch needle. This is the perfect needle for those two-way stretch fabrics because it's going to find its way through the fibers and make sure that your stitches land very nicely. Now, a couple of other very common types of needles, especially if you are an embroiderer, are embroidery and metallic needles. Metallic needles are what you need whenever you're working with your beautiful metallic threads, and that could be for decorative stitching as well as embroidery. It's got a specially shaped eye and shaft so that your threads glide through the eye of the needle and don't catch on anything and break like metallic threads sometimes do. You want to make sure you've got that metallic needle. Now, if you're an embroiderer, it's important to make sure that you have embroidery needles, and they also come in an assortment of different sizes. Now, what's special about your embroidery needles is that they have a larger eye and a coating on the inside of the eye so that your threads, regardless of type, can pass through the eye of the needle at the high rate of speed that your embroidery machine stitches at. So really important to make sure that you also have a package of embroidery needles if that's how you like to sew. Next, let's talk about a few different types of specialty needles. Here I have a package of leather needles, and these are specifically just for stitching with leather. They're going to pierce through the hide of leather very nicely and give you a beautiful stitch. But if you work with leather needles on a standard quilting cotton or other types of fabrics, you may find that it actually cuts your fabric. So this is just for working with leather. Next, one of my other favorite types of needles for decorative stitching is a twin needle. I get a lot of questions about how to use twin needles, and really it's not difficult at all. All it is a needle that you insert into your machine that comes down and has 2 points. So you're going to thread each of those tips with a different spool of thread, and then many of your decorative stitches will stitch side by side with a beautiful effect with decorative stitches and twin needles. It's also perfect for top stitching. If you're trying to run a row of top stitching along a hem and you want 2 rows of stitches perfectly parallel and spaced, a twin needle is the easiest way to get that job done. So those are just a few of my favorite types of needles, and I certainly hope that I've inspired you to start experimenting with different needles and get some of your own.